Hold on, guys. So today we're looking at two of the very compact options available from Olight. On the left-hand side, we have the S1 Baton Mini, and on the right, we have the S1R Turbo. Both of these are going to be single CR123 flashlights, very bright, very compact, and easily able to be fit into a pocket without any major bulk or inconvenience to have in them. So there's a few notable differences between these two flashlights. Now, right off the bat, I will say that the older light is going to be the S1R Turbo. This one is actually going to be a 900 lumen flashlight versus the S1 Baton Mini. I got this actually less than a year ago. This was something I purchased in 2018 versus 2017. This one is only going to be a 600 lumen flashlight, so this one is notably brighter. Now, as far as outside dimensions, the S1R Mini is going to be a much smaller light. Granted, it's only about a ½ inch shorter. Diameter is pretty much the same. You get a slight advantage down to maybe 100,000th. Even that's negligible at that. But the interesting thing to note is the belt clip actually does stick out a hair further because it does have that extra tip there. But at the end of the day, this one's a hair shorter, this one's a hair longer. That's the main thing size-wise. Now, as far as utility, there's actually going to be a very similar mode of operation on both. They both have the single button on the side to control them. So click to turn it on, and then hold down to cycle low, medium, and high, and then double click to go into the super bright mode, or triple click for strobe. Now I will note that the battery on this one is actually running down because, as you notice, when I had it in the super bright mode, it actually only lasted for about a second or so, and then it cut back down into the bright mode. So that is something you will notice as the battery runs down, and this applies to both of these, that you will no longer be able to use that double click to go super bright mode, and then it'll just automatically default to a lower level of output. Now, the one thing we have on the S1R Baton Turbo is you still have that same low, medium, high. Double click for extra bright, and then you can double click again, and it goes into the turbo mode, which it doesn't appear that that's coming out on the camera. And again, this battery is running a little low, so it's not actually staying in there. So super bright, and then a little brighter with that extra turbo mode, and then triple click and you can get the strobe. So that's going to be good for a utilitarian EDC type light. Personally, if I was using this for something like a firearm light, I wouldn't want to have all of those modes. I would really just want to have single tail click switch for on and off, and whenever it goes on, it goes into full brightness mode. And then whether or not it's a click each type switch or a press and hold, that will vary by what you're actually going for with. So if you're looking for something like an IDPA light, I want something you can click on and just stays on, versus tactical situations you may have reason to focus on a press and hold type switch. Something like this is great for a pocket utility light where you don't really have any need to have it on right this second, when if it takes an extra moment to fumble through the options, it's not going to be a big deal. So as far as the extra bright setting on this one, it's a nice little feature. It's good bragging rights of, oh, my flashlight's that much brighter, but it's not really usable for a long period of time because it doesn't stay on very long before it cuts back into a lower level of brightness. And frankly, I've only used it a handful of times. It's good if you're trying to see out in a dark field, maybe 100, 200 feet away. It is nice to have that extra little bit of brightness. But for 99% of the situations out there, they're both going to work perfectly fine. And then on both of these, I forgot to mention before, when they're in the off position, if you press and hold, after a couple seconds, they both go into their Moonlight Mode, which is so dull you can barely even tell on the table that it's on, but you can see it is shining in the lens of the camera. And that is going to be good for if you're just trying to not wake up someone when they're sleeping, just trying to read a map in a car. They'll both work well for that. And the battery life is extremely long. I think it was something in the matter of weeks rather than hours or minutes. So if you do want extremely long battery life, the Moonlight Mode is a great way to go. Now, as far as what I've found to like and dislike about both of these, I've actually found that this one is in my pocket far more often, and that actually surprised me. The big thing I do find I really like about this one is where it does have the dual direction pocket clip. You can actually slide this onto a brim of a hat and use it as a headlamp. The same thing applies to this one because where it is facing back towards the tail switch, not the tail switch, the tail cap rather than the lens, You can use this on the brim of a hat as well. It will tear up the material on the hat a little bit, but if you pull it out a little extra when you're putting it on, it's not going to be a big deal. This one, you do have the advantage if you wanted to put it in your pocket, hook it on your outside of your pocket and carry it lens down, you can do so. So that's something I've found to be really nice to have on something like the Streamlight Microstream, where it does have that same thing. I do tend to carry it with the lens down in my pocket and then use lens out when I want to put it on a hat. So that's something that I've actually found to be very useful. Now, the reason I found myself carrying the Mini far more often than the S1R Turbo is honestly just a little bit of size advantage. It's a little smaller, you notice it less in your pocket, and that was not something I expected. This one, it's that little bit of extra bulk does seem to make a difference for me personally, but other people may not care. They're both very small lights. And one thing I will say I really do like about the old design versus the new one is where the pocket clip is actually rotatable. You can slide it over the power switch and it almost functions as a lockout as opposed to partially unscrewing the tail cap. That is something I really like if I want to just drop it in a pocket and it's not going to be a quick access light that I need to be instantly on. Because what that happens is, where it is a very soft side switch, I've found that they can both accidentally get pressed in your pocket and be just left on inadvertently, and that's a very common issue with these. So you do need to be mindful that you're not accidentally turning your light on. They both have lockout functionality, but I really tend not to use them. That is about as much as I will actually do, is if it has the option to rotate the pocket clip, I can just push it right out of the way. And it also helps me find it if I know where it's going to be covered up by. This one, same thing. I can't rotate it, but I know it's always the opposite side of that, so it does index very quickly. So that is something to keep in mind. Your mileage may vary of what you prefer. I find this one is better because it's smaller, but I do like the lockout potential of this one. Now, the other main difference you'll notice with the two of these is how they charge. As I mentioned before, they are both single CR123 batteries. Both of them do offer a magnetic tail cap, but as I'm sure you'll notice on the one on the right, which is the S1R Turbo, it does have two metal rings here. So you have the center dot and then the outer ring, and that corresponds to the included charger, which is magnets on. Now, that is a really convenient way to charge the flashlight, but I really am not a fan and would actually advise against going with this if you carry it loosely in a pocket. Now, I've shown this once before in another video, and it does come with a major problem, because even though they're a little bit offset from each other, what will happen in your pocket if you're not careful is they will short out against one another and cause the flashlight to not work. Now, as I almost knocked the camera over, I'll see if I can actually get that to demonstrate here. So as you can see, it works fine, but if you short out that terminal together, which I don't know if I'm going to get that correctly, it no longer turns on. So clicking the button does nothing, and the only way to reset that is you loosen up the tail cap, screw it back on, and it works fine. Now, it does even warn on the back, do not short circuit those two terminals, because that is your positive and negative to your battery. It just puts it into a safety mode. It's good that it has it rather than actually letting it short out. However, it is something that I've found consistently does that in my pocket, whether I have another pocket knife in there or something else, loose change. It always seems to short circuit itself. And that's one of the biggest reasons I found, even beyond the size, that keeps this out of my pocket and becomes more of a utility light on a shelf. This one does not have that. It's just a magnetic tail cap. It does still function as it should. They both will hold themselves up, and that is a really useful feature to have. But to charge this guy, you have to actually remove the tail cap, take the battery out, and they actually put a USB micro port right on the side of the battery so you can charge it. So I'm not sure how well it's showing up on camera, but you have a little terminal right there. And it's going to be the same thing you use to charge your phone if you have a slightly older Android device. It is not USB-C. So that is something that's nice to have. And then I've really found I really prefer that way over the magnetic charging tail cap on this guy. So with that in mind, I want to know in the comment section below, if you guys had both of these lights, which would you carry? What did you like better? And honestly, why? So I'm curious to see what the consensus is in the comment section below. So, as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.